Good morning and welcome back. It is now September 18th and it is a windy one out here this morning. Sounds like the weather this week is supposed to be cooler, so hopefully we can get off some of these last stubborn fields like this canola here behind me. There is still a few green pods in this field, but we might have to just take it off as is, and we might get a little bit of loss on it, but it could potentially be better than letting it sit here in what could be windy, cloudy, potentially rainy weather for the next week. Here we got some winter wheat seeded. Let's see here, it's not, that one's not germinated yet, but it's, oh yeah, these guys are just starting to germinate here. They're still pretty small, but they're in the moisture. This is on potato stubble, so we were able to irrigate it, and it's gonna get off to a good start. Should be off to the races pretty quick. But you can also see we do have a bunch of volunteer canola and stuff starting to come up in here as well. So be interesting to see how this all comes out. I think it's safe to say we had a little bit of a miss here spraying out this patch of alfalfa in a dry land corner here. You can see a pretty good line here. So this was hit with Roundup DB878 and 2,4-D, and it doesn't look like this was hit with anything. It's still really nice and healthy. So this was applied not even quite a week ago. So looking good so far, except for that patch. Lots of corn silage coming off. This is Pride 1027 out by Nobleford, looking really good, coming off at a pretty good yield. Well, this silage pile has gotten a lot bigger in the last week compared to when I saw it last and filmed it with the drone. Definitely can't fly the drone today, way too windy, but who knows, maybe later on this week I'll get some more drone footage. Here's one of my fields that's been seeded into fall rye. We're getting some pretty good emergence in here. You'll see some of the fall rye can sometimes be kind of a funny looking color compared to something like a winter wheat. It can be quite purple when it first comes up. That's pretty normal, nothing really to be worried about. After a day or two of photosynthesizing, it'll green up and look perfectly normal. As far as this field goes, there were still a few weeds in it visible last week, but we did spray it with Blackhawk prior to seeding, and now it has cleaned up substantially better than last week visually. A lot of those pigweeds and stuff have really died off and burned down now. You can see we still do have some volunteer barley coming up in this field, but we did take care of most of that when we did the pre-burn in here, but there'll always be some that'll come up, but the first serious frost of the fall should get that under control. With every week that goes by, we're getting closer and closer to harvest timing on these silage oats. They are starting to fill out pretty well. We're, for the most part, we're still in milk stage on a lot of these guys here, but these heads are getting fatter and fatter every week. So it's only a matter of time before we get in here. We're gonna have to try to, beat the snow, beat the frost on these guys anyways, but right now, potential in here, looking excellent. Even on some dry land, we're now starting to see some pretty good emergence of fall rye. If it got deep enough to get into moisture, some of those showers we've gotten over the last few weeks have provided us enough moisture to get germination now. So things here do have some potential for next year. Well, there's still quite a few corn acres still standing. After all, there's only so many silage choppers out there and so many trucks that can run at one time. You can see this field still looks quite green. However, the ears are starting to get quite mature and are rapidly starting to dry down. You can see we're starting to get kind of vitreous caps on a lot of these kernels now as they really drop down. This is a Pioneer hybrid. It is a dent variety, and you can see it's doing pretty good. Getting pretty mature now at this time. I'm sure this field is going to come off right away. Well, today we're out here checking this field of canola stubble. This was harvested a couple of weeks ago. It has now been seeded into fall rye. So let's take a look here, see if we can find some seed. You can see soil conditions are fairly dry. Here's some seed sitting about 3/4 of an inch deep. You can see no sign of germination yet. There's very little soil moisture available here right now. We need some showers to really get this going. Because this is canola stubble, we were already seeing a fair bit of volunteer canola. You can see there's one right here. So we did spray this with Thunderhawk just prior to seeding. If you're not familiar with Thunderhawk, it's a new farm product. Very similar to Blackhawk, except instead of 2,4-D in it, it's MCPA. And it also has some flurazolam in there, so that'll give you a little bit of residual canola control, and that's always a good thing. I don't expect that residual to hang out over the winter, but if it prevents fall annuals from coming up this spring, that is a pretty good bonus, right, Stella? Here in this canola field that hasn't been seeded into anything, you can see we do have a fair amount of volunteer canola that has come up. You can see it's getting chewed pretty good by some flea beetles in here, but overall it's still surviving and thriving. We need to get a frost to get some of these guys under control. Down here in McGrath, we're checking out some pea stubble, and you can see that there is some wild oats in here. So these guys are all, still relatively small and young, and hopefully down here we'll be getting a killing frost in the next week or two probably. So I'm not too concerned about these guys. The odds of them getting large enough to set seed is relatively small at this time of the year, but you never know. Here along the edge of this field, you can see where we've had pretty good effect spraying Black Hawk here to control all of this kochia. You can quite clearly see farther out in the field. More of that volunteer barley out there is green, but for the most part, we were just trying to take care of these kochia patches here. You can see we've had pretty good effect in here. Is that 100%? No, there is still a few green ones here and there, but for the most part, we've gotten, probably 90% control here. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.